Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more Gnosis. Today we are diving back into the works of Mr. Rudolf Steiner. We are beginning a new exploration. This is Christianity as a Mystical Fact. We are reading aloud and discussing, as we go along, the various points brought to light by the text. It's not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive in and begin our exploration of Christianity as a mystical fact. We're going to read the preface. I don't know the format, right? This is a single PDF document, and so it just reads from the top to the bottom. We will stop in the appropriate place, probably around an hour. Preface to the second edition. Christianity as Mystical Fact was the title given by the author to this work when, 8 years ago, he gathered into it the substance of the lectures delivered by him in 1902. The title indicated the special character of the book. In it, the attempt was made not merely to represent historically the mystical content of Christianity, but to describe the origin of Christianity from the standpoint of mystical contemplation. Underlying this intention was the thought that at the genesis of Christianity, mystical facts were at work which can only be perceived by such contemplation. It is only the book itself which can make clear that by mystical, its author does not imply a conception which relies more on vague feelings than on strictly scientific statements. It is true that mysticism is at present widely understood in the former sense, and hence it is declared by many to be a sphere of the human soul life with which true science can have nothing to do. In this book, the word mysticism is used in the sense of the representation of a spiritual fact, which can only be recognized in its true nature when the knowledge of it is derived from the sources of spiritual life itself. It is the kind of knowledge drawn from such if the kind of knowledge drawn from such sources is rejected, the reader will not be in a position to judge of the contents of this book. Only one who allows that the same clearness may exist in mysticism as in a true representation of the facts of natural science will be ready to admit that the content of Christianity as mysticism may also be mystically described. For it is not only a question of the contents of the book, but first and foremost, the methods of knowledge by means of which statements in it are made. It is important to note, I have done a Bible study. It is 161 videos of me leaving Christianity through the study of the book. Right? We went through the Old Testament and determined that the Old Testament is absolutely not a source for truth, pretty much at all. There is a few pieces of truth contained within it, but for the most part, it is erroneous. Once again, I refer you to the Bible study if you do not understand that. We did a small study in the New Testament where we discovered the same thing. It does not accord with any way, shape, form at all with Judaism, right? It is a complete and total about-face from what Judaism was attempting to create. It is extremely likely that the New Testament was formed from the prior existing beliefs of the Greek and Mediterranean world, the Hellenistic beliefs, that were appropriated and changed into something, right? What it was changed into was a hiding of the gnosis. That is the theory, at least. That is what we are exploring here, right? We know that it cannot be taken literally, right? You cannot take the New Testament in a literal interpretation. It defies itself. It contradicts itself. It is self-excluding, right? It lets you know this is not real, true, accurate depictions, but it may work as an allegory. And so we are going to investigate whether, my assumption with this book is that we will be investigating whether or not that is an actual thing, right? There should be contained in here some comparative analysis between the Hellenistic beliefs, or the Gnosis, and the New Testament beliefs. If that is off-putting to you, you are not going to enjoy this study. If you are looking for someone who is going to tell you that the Bible is incontrovertible truth, this is definitely not the spot for you. We have investigated that quite thoroughly and have discovered that that is simply not true. I am hoping that we will be seeing in here that Christianity as mysticism is a thing, right? If it is or if it isn't, I don't really care. Most of what we discovered from the Gnosis, we just did G.R.S. Mead's Fragments of a Faith Forgotten. And most of the Gnosis information contained in there is not, in my estimation, the true path to ascension, the true path to enlightenment. I have a book, right? The link is provided in the description box down below. You can have me read it to you if you are a member, where I describe how I have achieved at least a small level of enlightenment. I am at least an adept. I manipulate the electromagnetic forces of creation to do healing upon myself. That is a thing which has occurred. And again, I describe it in detail in other places. And so for me, this is more about understanding other people's viewpoints and seeing if there is evidence to support the New Testament coming from the Hellenized ideas. I wanted to clear that up, and this was a good place to put that. So, back to the text. Many there are in the present day who have a most violent dislike to such methods, which are regarded as conflicting with the ways of true science. And this is not only the case with those willing to admit other interpretations of the world than their own on the ground of genuine knowledge of natural science, but also with those who, as believers, wish to study the nature of Christianity. The author of this book stands on the ground of a conception which sees that the achievements of natural science in our age must lead into true mysticism. In fact, any other attitude as regards knowledge actually contradicts everything presented by the achievements of natural science. The facts of natural science itself, indeed, cannot be comprehended by means of those methods of knowledge which so many people would like to employ to the exclusion of others, under the illusion that they stand on the firm ground of natural science. It is only when we are prepared to admit that a full appreciation of our present admirable knowledge of nature is compatible with genuine mysticism that we can take the contents of this book into consideration. The author's intention is to show, by means of what is here called mystical knowledge, how the source of Christianity prepared its own ground in the mysteries of pre-Christian times. In this pre-Christian mysticism, we find the soil in which Christianity throve, as a germ of quite independent nature. This point of view makes it possible to understand Christianity in its independent being, even though its evolution is traced from pre-Christian mysticism. If this point of view be overlooked, it is very possible to misunderstand that independent character, and to think that Christianity was merely a further development of what already existed in pre-Christian mysticism. Many people of the present day have fallen into this error, comparing the content of Christianity with pre-Christian conceptions, and then thinking that Christian ideas were only a continuation of the former. The following pages are intended to show that Christianity presupposes the earlier mysticism just as a seed must have its soil. It is intended to emphasize the peculiar character of the essence of Christianity through the knowledge of its evolution, but not to extinguish it. It is with deep satisfaction that the author is able to mention that this account of the nature of Christianity has found acceptance with a writer who has enriched the culture of our time in the highest sense of the word, by his important works on the spiritual life of humanity. Edouard Chure, author of Les Grandes Niches, is so far in accord with the attitude of this book that he undertook to translate it into French under the title Les Mystères chez Chrétiens et les Mystères Antiques. It may be mentioned, by the way, as a symptom of the existence at the present time of a longing to understand the nature of Christianity as presented in this work, that the first edition was translated into other European languages besides French. The author has not found occasion to alter anything essential in preparation of the second edition. On the other hand, what was written 8 years ago has been enlarged, and the endeavor has been made to express many things more exactly and circumstantially than was then possible. Unfortunately, the author was obliged, through stress of work, to let a long period elapse between the time when the first edition was exhausted and the appearance of the second. Rudolf Steiner, May 1910. We're going to skip through and go down to the beginning. Christianity as a Mystical Fact, Chapter 1, Points of View. Natural science has deeply influenced modern thought. It is becoming more and more impossible to speak of the spiritual needs and the life of the soul without taking into consideration the achievements and methods of this science. It must be admitted, however, that many people satisfy these needs without letting themselves be troubled by its influence. But those who feel the beating of the pulse of the age must take this influence into consideration. With increasing swiftness, ideas derived from natural science take possession of our brains, and, unwillingly though it may be, our hearts follow, often in dejection and dismay. It is not a question only of the number thus won over, but of the fact that there is a force within the method of natural science which convinces the attentive observer that the method contains something which cannot be neglected, and is one by which any modern conception of the universe must be profoundly affected. Many of the outgrowths of this method compel a justifiable rejection, but such rejection is not sufficient in an age in which very many resort to this way of thinking and are attracted to it as if by magic. The case is in no way altered because some people see that true science long ago passed by its own initiative beyond the shallow doctrines of force and matter taught by materialists. It would be better, apparently, to listen to those who boldly declare that the ideas of natural science will form the basis of a new religion. And it has. If these ideas appear shallow and superficial to one who knows the deeper spiritual needs of humanity, he must nevertheless take note of them, for it is to them that attention is now turned, and there is reason to think that they will claim more and more notice in the near future. Now, let's clarify my statement, right? It has formed a new religion. This was in the 1910 was the second edition, so it was put out 8 years prior to that. That would be 1902. We were just coming into the understanding of scientific knowledge. We did not yet have the electron microscope. We have not yet isolated hydrogen or helium. We did isolate hydrogen way back in the 1400s, but the helium was not yet isolated. We had not had the periodic table. There were still great advancements in chemistry forthcoming. We did not yet have an internal combustion engine. We were a couple of years away from flight by the second edition. We had just got the Ford when this was put out. The Model T was brand new, right? So that's our conception of history. Since then, what have we seen? The rise of atheism, people saying there is no God, everything is ruled by natural science. And if you disagree with that whatsoever, you are excluded from academic pursuits, right? If you believe that there is a creator, you're going to have a really hard time in science. You have to hide the fact that you believe. For the most part, I believe that there is a blending of God and science, right? I believe that science is how God makes things happen, and our understanding of science just gives us a better understanding of God. But that is because I do not anthropomorphize God, right? God is infinite, beyond our conception. If you are saying that God is a he, which I do quite often, you are limiting God more than God can be limited. If you are saying even that he is the creator, you are limiting God to the role of creator, which is a big limit, but it is still a limit. Now, God, as the limitless infinite, created us, and by so doing became spirit. God is the infinite. Spirit is the infinite restricted into the finite. It is completely composed of God, right? Every single atom in existence, anywheres, at any point in time, ever in history, is the spirit. Every single atom. That is the infinite restricted into the finite, becomes the spirit, which is literally everything in existence. But at that moment, when the infinite becomes limited to the finite, that is the beginning. That very moment of change from the creator being limitless and beyond all comprehension into something that we can kind of comprehend, that is the moment of the beginning, right? Everything exists, but it's not in form yet. We don't have planets or novas or stars or cosmic dust, really, even. There's just big clouds of elements out there. The change that comes along from the ionic bonds of these elements forming into things, that is the Logos. That is God saying, I am the light, which is how Genesis actually reads, I am the light. And it was good, right? The word spoken is the Logos, and it is literally every instance of change anywhere in the entirety of existence. And so every time you see a ray of light coming from any source, that is the spirit. Anytime you feel any heat coming from any source, that is the spirit. That is the Logos. That is the power of change enacted. Most people, especially Christians, really do not understand that concept. They really think that Jesus was the personification of change in the entirety of the universe, put into one person at one time. And that's just silly, right? It doesn't work on many levels. But as an allegory, it might, right? Not on a literal level. There is no personification of Logos. Logos is within me. It is within you. It is within the air we breathe. It is all places at all times. It is synonymous with the spirit. It is just the spirit in motion. And so what I am hoping to clarify here is along those lines, right? There is no separation from the creator in science. There is only separation of our understanding of how the creator uses science. And while we do indeed right now worship science, right? If you don't believe that, you did not live through 2020, right? Where suddenly there was this thing and everybody was follow the science, even though the science absolutely did not lead there. They absolutely said you have to follow the science, exactly as if it were a religion. Exactly. If you deviate, you are shunned. You are not allowed to participate in society. That is exactly like a religion. And so science has, over the course of the last 120 years, evolved into a religion that denies the creator of existence. That to me is untenable. I believe that there is a created universe for a variety of reasons, which I've expounded upon in many ways. But the main thing is like evolution does not work on a macro level. It does on a micro level, right? Variation within the species absolutely takes place, even today. Variation from species to species, this species changing into that species, we have not seen, not once ever in the history of anything, right? We make assumptions because we found this body and we find this body and we say, oh, this one obviously evolved into that one. But there is no transitory position, right? We've explained this several times, so I'm going to go ahead and stop here. We have turned science into a religion, and I'm not happy with the way that it has turned out. I believe in a created world. I believe that we are here for a purpose. We have discussed that as well. So let's go ahead and get back into the text and see where it leads. Where did I put my glasses? There they are. All right. Another class of people have also to be taken into account. Those whose hearts have lagged behind their heads. With their reason, they cannot but accept the ideas of natural science. The burden of proof is too much for them, but those ideas cannot satisfy the religious needs of their souls. The perspective offered is too dreary. Is the human soul to rise on the wings of enthusiasm to the heights of beauty, truth, and goodness, only for each individual to be swept away in the end like a bubble blown by the material brain? This is a feeling which oppresses many minds like a light nightmare. But scientific concepts oppress them also, coming as they do with the mighty force of authority. As long as they can, these people remain blind to the discord in their souls. Indeed, they console themselves by saying that Full clearness in these matters is denied to the human soul. They think in accordance with natural science so long as the experience of their senses and the logic of their intellect demand it. But they keep to the religious sentiments in which they have been educated, and prefer to remain in darkness as to these matters. A darkness which clouds their understanding. They have not the courage to battle through to the light. There can be no doubt whatever that the habit of thought derived from natural science is the greatest force in modern intellectual life, and it must not be passed by heedlessly by anyone concerned with the spiritual interest of humanity. But it is nonetheless true that the way in which it sets about satisfying spiritual needs is superficial and shallow. If this were the right way, the outlook would indeed be dreary. Would it not be depressing to be obliged to agree with those who say, "Thought is a form of force. We walk by means of the same force by which we think. Man is an organism which transforms various forms of force into thought force, an organism, the activity of which we maintain by what we call food, and with which we produce what we call thought." What a marvelous chemical process it is which could change a certain quantity of food into the divine tragedy of Hamlet. This is quoted from a pamphlet of Robert G. Ingersoll bearing the title, Modern Twilight of the Gods. It matters little if such thoughts find but scanty acceptance in the outside world. The point is that innumerable people find themselves compelled by the system of natural science to take up, with regard to the world processes, an attitude in conformity with the above, even when they think they are not doing so. It would certainly be a dreary outlook if natural science itself compelled us to accept the creed proclaimed by many of its modern prophets. Most dreary of all for one who has gained from the content of natural science the conviction that in its own sphere its mode of thought holds good and its methods are unassailable. For he is driven to make the admission that, however much people may dispute about individual questions, though volume after volume may be written, and thousands of observations accumulated about the struggle for existence and its insignificance, about the omnipotence or powerlessness of natural selection, natural science itself is moving in a direction which, within certain limits, must find acceptance in an ever-increasing degree. But are the demands made by natural science really such as they are described by some of its representatives? That they are not so is proved by the method employed by these representatives themselves. The method they use in their own sphere is not such as is often described and claimed for other spheres of thought. Would Darwin and Ernst Haeckel ever have made their great discoveries about the evolution of life if, instead of observing life and the structure of living beings, they had shut themselves up in a laboratory and there made chemical experiments with tissue cut out of an organism? Would Lyell have been able to describe the development of the crust of the earth if, instead of examining strata and their contents, he had scrutinized the chemical qualities of innumerable rocks? Let us really follow in the footsteps of these investigators who tower like giants in the domain of modern science. We shall then apply to the higher regions of spiritual life the methods they have used in the study of nature. We shall not, then, believe we have understood the nature of the divine tragedy of Hamlet by saying that a wonderful chemical process transformed a certain quantity of food into that tragedy. We shall believe it as little as an investigator of nature could seriously believe that he has understood the mission of heat in the evolution of the earth when he has studied the action of heat on the sulfur in a retort. Neither does he attempt to understand the construction of the human brain by examining the effects of liquid potash on a fragment of it, but rather by inquiring how the brain has, in the course of evolution, been developed out of the organs of lower organisms. It is therefore quite true that one who is investigating the nature of spirit can do nothing better than learn from natural science. He needs only do as science does, but he must not allow himself to be misled by what individual representatives of natural science would dictate to him. He must investigate in the spiritual as they do in the physical domain, but he need not adopt the opinions they entertain about the spiritual world, confused as they are by their exclusive contemplation of physical phenomena. We shall only be acting in the spirit of natural science if we study the spiritual development of man as impartially as the naturalist observes the sense world. We shall then certainly be led, in the domain of spiritual life, to a kind of contemplation which differs from that of the naturalist as geology differs from pure physics and biology from chemistry. We shall be led up to higher methods, which cannot, it is true, be those of natural science, though quite conformable with the spirit of it. Such methods alone are able to bring us to the heart of spiritual developments, such as that of Christianity, or other worlds of religious conceptions. Anyone applying these methods may arouse the opposition of many who believe that they are thinking scientifically, but he will know himself, for all that, to be in full accord with a genuinely scientific method of thought. An investigator of this kind must also go beyond a merely historical examination of the documents relating to spiritual life. This is necessary just on account of the attitude he has acquired from his study of natural history. When a chemical law is explained, it is of small use to describe the retorts, dishes, and tinctures which have led to the discovery of the law. And it is just as useless, when explaining the origin of Christianity, to ascertain the historical sources drawn upon by the evangelist St. Luke, or those from which the hidden revelation of St. John is compiled. History can, in this case, be only the outer court to research proper. It is not by tracing the historical origin of documents that we shall discover anything about the dominant ideas in the writings of Moses or in the traditions of the Greek mystics. These documents are only the outer expression for the ideas. Nor does the naturalist who is investigating the nature of man trouble about the origin of the word man, or the way in which it is developed in a language. He keeps to the thing, not to the word in which it finds expression. And in studying spiritual life, we must likewise abide by the Spirit and not by outer documents. Chapter 2. The Mysteries and Their Wisdom. A kind of mysterious veil hangs over the manner in which spiritual needs were satisfied during the older civilizations by those who sought a deeper religious life and fuller knowledge than the popular religions offered. If we inquire how these needs were satisfied, we find ourselves led into the dim twilight of the mysteries, and the individual seeking them disappears for a time from our observation. We see how it is that the popular religions cannot give him what his heart desires. He acknowledges the existence of the gods, but knows that the ordinary ideas about them do not solve the great problems of existence. He seeks a wisdom which is jealously guarded by a community of priest-sages. His aspiring soul seeks a refuge in this community. If he is found by the sages to be sufficiently prepared, he is led up by them, step by step, to higher knowledge, in places hidden from the eyes of outward observers. What then happens to him is concealed from the uninitiated. He seems for a time to be entirely removed from earthly life and to be transported into a hidden world. When he reappears in the light of day, a different, quite transformed person is before us. We see a man who cannot find words sublime enough to express the momentous experience through which he has passed. That is true, right? If you are unaware, I've had a couple of spiritual experiences. I've had a couple of what I call near-death experiences. Other people may not see them that way, but I was knocked out of my body through trauma, right? And I had to make the decision to get back into my body. But I've also had spiritual experiences where I was taken out of my body by an entity. I never laid eyes upon the entity. I had the feeling of being comforted, being held, and I was given a tour of the creation of the universe, and I got to see the interaction between people. How decisions make the difference in everyday life. How attitude makes the difference in everyday life. But there are no real words that I can use to explain that other than what I just said, right? I can take you step by step, and it's a little bit hard, right? I see the planets forming, and I see the orbits beginning to evolve. I see the beginnings of life. I see the interaction of the life. But there's no way for me to accurately portray that to you. It was beyond my comprehension in some ways, right? Now, I understood most of it, but there are probably things upon reflection which would take more reflection to understand. And so, when you go through this spiritual experience, it absolutely does change you, right? You reappear in the light of day, different, quite transformed. That was the experience that took away from me the enjoyment of watching entertainment, right? I cannot watch anything on Netflix. I can't watch anything that comes on regular television. I can't watch any of the movies that come out. I'm disgusted by them. And like on a visceral level, I see the things, I hear the things that I am like rejected from them. I hear it in my whole body just, ugh, right? That was because of this experience. I came out a different, quite transformed person, but I still cannot explain it to you. I just wanted to point out from my personal experience that this is something that I absolutely do identify with. Back to the text. Not merely metaphorically, but in a most real sense, does he seem to have gone through the gate of death and to have reawakened, or to have awakened, to a new and higher life. He is, moreover, quite certain that no one who has not had a similar experience can understand his words. All of that is a true thing, right? I tell you all of the time, I can tell you about my experience, I can't give it to you. I can only relate to you what has happened to me. And it is beyond the ability for most people to accept, right? It is different than what most people understand. This was what happened to those who were initiated into the mysteries. Now, it is important to note, I am not a member of any of the groups. All of my experiences came from directly prayer, fasting, and meditation. All of it came directly from source with no intervention from any entities, no angels, no demons, none of that. Right? None of the things other than the entity which was holding me in my spiritual experience. And I never saw a face, never heard a name, right? That wasn't part of the experience. And so, again, I am not initiated, right? There is no process through which I went to achieve the knowledge that I have other than internal prayer, fasting, and meditation, which we talk about quite extensively. Who were initiated into the mysteries, into that secret wisdom withheld from the people in which threw light on the greatest questions. This secret religion of the elect existed side by side with the popular religion. Its origin vanishes, as far as history is concerned, into the obscurity in which the origins of nations is lost. We find this secret religion everywhere among the ancients as far as we know anything concerning them, and we hear their sages speak of the mysteries with the greatest reverence. What was it that was concealed in them, and what did they unveil to the initiate? The enigma becomes still more puzzling when we discover that the ancients looked upon the mysteries as something dangerous. The way leading to the secrets of existence passed through a world of terrors, and woe to him who tried to gain them unworthily. There was no greater crime than the betrayal of secrets to the uninitiated. The traitor was punished with death and the confiscation of his property. We know that the poet Aeschylus was accused of having reproduced on the stage something from the mysteries. He was only able to escape death by fleeing to the altar of Dionysus and by legally proving that he had never been initiated. What the ancients say about these secrets is significant, but at the same time, ambiguous. The initiate is convinced that it would be a sin to tell what he knows, and also that it would be sinful for the uninitiated to listen. Plutarch speaks of the terror of those about to be initiated and compares their state of mind to preparation for death. A special mode of life had to precede initiation, tending to give the spirit the mastery over the senses. Fasting, solitude, mortifications, and certain exercises for the soul were the means employed. The things to which man clings in ordinary life were to lose all their value for him, the whole trend of his life of sensation and feeling was to be changed. There can be no doubt as to the meaning of such exercises and tests. The wisdom which was to be offered to the candidate for initiation could only produce the right effect upon his soul if he had previously purified the lower life of his sensibility. He was introduced to the life of the spirit. He was to behold a higher world, but he could not enter into relations with that world without previous exercises and tests. The relations thus gained were the condition of initiation. In order to obtain a correct idea on this matter, it is necessary to gain experience of the intimate facts of the growth of knowledge. We must feel that there are two widely divergent attitudes towards that which the highest knowledge gives. The world surrounding us is to us at first the real one. We feel, hear, and see what goes on in it, and because we thus perceive things with our senses, we call them real, and we reflect about events in order to get an insight into their connections. On the other hand, what wells up in our soul is at first not real to us in the same sense. It is merely thoughts and ideas. At the most, we see in them only images of reality. They themselves have no reality, for we cannot touch, see, or hear them. There is another way of being connected with things. A person who clings to the kind of reality described above will hardly understand it, but it comes to certain people at some moment in their lives. To them, the whole connection with the world is completely reversed. They then call up the images which well up into the spiritual life of their souls actually real, and they assign only a lower kind of reality to what the senses hear, touch, feel, and see. In my estimation, that is not a correct way to operate. Right? We are in a reality. Now, it is not, in my estimation, the end-all be-all. I believe that the soul is eternal, that it was somewheres prior to incarnation, and that it will go somewheres when incarnation is done. I believe that prior to our incarnation, we agreed to come here. We, as a soul, the individualized piece of divinity which makes decisions for the 5D navigation device, we decided to come here. We decided to learn things while we are here, and because of that, this existence is real. It has real consequences. It has real actions that you can really take to really change your life. Now, manifestation is possible. The spiritual world is real as well, and so to me, both of them are real. There is no, this one is real and this one is not. It is just simply different phases of existence, like walking from one room into another. Just because we are in this room right here does not mean that this room is an illusion, right? Just because you are here right now doesn't mean that that doesn't exist. Just because that does exist does not mean that this is an illusion. All of those are incorrect ways of looking at it. Now, for the most part, what we have discovered from Judaism, from Christianity, and from Gnosticism so far, and even Buddhism, right, due to some of the studies, is that they are intrinsic upon this is a prison planet. This is a false incarnation. This is something that you are meant to deny and overcome. And that is, to me, not true. You are here to learn lessons here. Not for an eternal life. You've already got that. Not because of some eternal consequences of a burning hell. That is not a biblical concept. I know that's going to be too much for somebody. Go and check out the Bible study. Hell and heaven, neither one of those exist according to the Old Testament at all. And so it is important to me that you understand you are here voluntarily. This is not a prison. You are not incarnated, or you are not incarcerated in your incarnation. You are here to learn lessons. And some of those lessons are fucking wonderful. You learn the bliss of finding your soulmate and living together for 60 years, 70 years, right? Some of them suck. Sometimes you find your soulmate and they die a year later. That is a terrible lesson to learn, but it is a necessary one if it has happened. You are here to learn the lessons, whether they are good or bad. And because of that, nothing that happens to you is intrinsically bad. It's bad in the moment, right? I got a broken leg right now. I'm still recovering from a broken leg inflicted upon me by my neighbor who has problems. I could look at that as a bad thing. I could say, oh, I have to overcome, the mortal world and all. But no, there was a lesson for me to learn inside of my leg being broken. I have learned several. I've learned humility. I've learned gratefulness. I've learned how to work magic a little bit better because of my broken leg. If not for my broken leg, I would not have learned those lessons in the same way. And so my broken leg is not bad. It's not great. I'm not happy about it. It wasn't a pleasant experience, but it is one I can learn from, and therefore I accept it, even if it sucks. That is the mentality you have to have if you actually want to achieve the things that I talk about. Now, you may be able to do this with that other mentality. You may be able to go to a different system and get some wisdom. I highly doubt it, but that is because I have taken a different path, and I have outlined my path, right? I've detailed it. There is a link provided down below. There is a series that you can watch where I read that book aloud, where I detail it in detail. I tell you how I did it. I tell you how I got there, and I tell you what I do. And so you can judge for yourself. This is not a prison planet. You are not trapped in an illusion. Back to the text. They know that they cannot prove what they say, and that they can only relate their new experiences. I tell you that all the time. And that, when relating them to others, they are in the position of a man who can see and who imparts his visual impressions to one born blind. That is very true. They venture to impart their inner experiences, trusting that there are others around them whose spiritual eyes, though as yet closed, may be opened by the power of what they hear. For they have faith in humanity and want to give it spiritual sight. They can only lay before it the fruits which their spirits has gathered. Whether another sees them depends on his spiritual eyes being opened or not. There is something in man which at first prevents him from seeing with the eyes of the spirit. He is not there for that purpose. He is what his senses are, and his intellect is only the interpreter and judge of them. The senses would ill fulfill their mission if they did not insist upon the truth and infallibility of their evidence. An eye must, from its own point of view, uphold the absolute reality of its perceptions. The eye is right, as far as it goes, and is not deprived of its due by the eye of the spirit. Agreed, they are both equally valid. The latter only allows us to see the things of the senses in a higher light. Nothing seen by the eye of sense is denied, but a new brightness, hitherto unseen, radiates from what is seen. And then we know that what we first saw was only a lower reality. Not necessarily. It is just an alternate view. That the upper and lower thing really bugs me too. We see that still, but it is immersed in something higher, which is spirit. It is now a question of whether we realize and feel what we see. One who lives only in the sensations and feelings of the senses will look upon the impressions of higher things as a fata morgana, or mere play of fancy. His feelings are entirely directed towards the thing of sense. He grasps emptiness when he tries to lay hold of spirit forms. They withdraw from him when he gropes after them. They are just mere thoughts. He thinks them, but does not live in them. They are images, less real to him than the fleeting dreams. They rise up like bubbles while he is standing in his reality. They disappear before the massive, solidly built reality of which his senses tell him. It is otherwise with one whose perceptions and feelings with regard to reality have changed. For him, that reality has lost its absolute stability and value. His senses and feelings need not become numbed, but they begin to be doubtful of their absolute authority. They leave room for something else. The world of spirit begins to animate the space left. At this point, a possibility comes in which may prove terrible. A man may lose his sensations and feelings of outer reality without finding any new reality opening up before him. He then feels himself as if suspended in the void. He feels as if he were dead. The old values have disappeared and no new ones have arisen in their place. The world and man no longer exist for him. This, however, is by no means a mere possibility. It happens at some time or other to everyone who is seeking for higher knowledge. He comes to a point at which the spirit represents all life to him as death. He is then no longer in the world, but under it, in the netherworld. He is passing through Hades. Well for him if he sink not. Happy if a new world opened up before him. Either he dwindles away or he appears to himself transfigured. In the latter case he beholds a new sun and a new earth. The whole world has been born again for him out of spiritual fire. It is thus that the initiates describe the effect of the mysteries upon them. Menippus relates that he journeyed to Babylon in order to be taken to Hades and to be brought back again by the successors of Zarathustra. He says that he swam across the great water on his wanderings, and that he passed through fire and ice. We hear that the mystics were terrified by a flashing sword, and that blood flowed. We understand this when we know from experience the point of transition from lower to higher knowledge. We then feel as if all solid matter and all things of sense had dissolved into water, and as if the ground were cut away from under our feet. Everything is dead which we felt before to be alive. The spirit has passed through the life of the senses as a sword pierces a worn body. We have seen the blood of sense nature flow, but a new life has appeared. We have risen from the netherworld. The orator, Aristides, relates this. I thought I touched the god and felt him draw near, and I was then between waking and sleeping. My spirit was so light that no one who is not initiated can speak of it or understand it. This new existence is not subject to the laws of lower life. Growth and decay no longer affect it. That is not true. You do indeed grow. Maybe not decay. I haven't had that effect yet, but there is definitely growth in the new life. One may say much about the eternal, but words of one who has not been through Hades are mere sound and smoke. I have not been through Hades. The initiates have a new conception of life and death. Now, for the first time, do they feel they have the right to speak about immortality. That I do. They know that one who speaks of it without having been initiated talks of something which he does not understand. And again, that is not necessarily true because I have a better understanding than most people. That may come across a little bit prideful, but such is life, I guess. I do not mean it that way. I really do try to maintain an aura of humility. I really do. It may not come across in the videos, but in real life, I do. I do understand. This is one of the things that I understand, and it is one of those things that cannot be proven, right? It is something I can relay to you, but I cannot give to you. There is an existence. It is prior to, and it is after. It is a collection. It is a return to the oneness. It is a full understanding of all things, and it is something I cannot relay, right? I can only tell you. I can't give it to you. But you do not have to be initiated for these things to be true, right? As a matter of fact, if you are being initiated, then you are being guided to what is true. I was not guided to what is true. I was shown what was true without the guidance. To me, that is important. Back to the text. The uninitiated attribute immortality. The uninitiated attribute immortality only to something which is subject to the laws of growth and decay. The mystics, however, did not merely desire to gain the conviction that the kernel of life is eternal. According to the view of the mysteries, such a conviction would be quite valueless, for this view holds that the eternal is not present as a living reality in the uninitiated. If such an one spoke of the eternal, he would be speaking of something non-existent. It is rather the eternal itself that the mystics are seeking. They have first to awaken the eternal within them. Then they can speak of it. Hence, the hard saying of Plato is quite real to them, that the uninitiated sinks into the mire, and that only one who has passed through the mystical life enters eternity. It is only in this sense that the words of the fragment of Sophocles can be understood. Thrice blessed are the initiated who come to the realm of the shades. They alone have life there. For others there is only misery and hardship. All right, now this is a point of pride, right? The soul is eternal. You don't have to believe that. I do. It was somewheres prior to being incarnated. If you are a Christian, there is a Bible verse for that. I knew you before you were knitted in your mother's womb. There are more, but that is the most prominent. You existed prior to being in this body. You will exist as a soul outside of the body in the exact same way that you existed as a soul prior to being in the body. Now, I believe that the soul is a individualized piece of divinity that is given to everyone. Whether our next life is with the exact same soul or a different configuration of the eternal, that's up for debate. But to me, there is no debate about the eternality of the soul. It came from somewheres, it will return somewheres. To me, that is indisputable. Because of that, this is not true, right? First of all, there is no hell. There is no heaven. There is no hell. Neither one of those is contained in the Old Testament at all. There is the land of the dead, which can be likened to Hades, but I didn't have to pass through it to receive initiation, right? I have been initiated into a club, but I don't hold any ability to do anything really with that, right? I've talked about it before. And so I have achieved at least a little bit of enlightenment, right? I don't claim to be a master, but I do claim to be an acolyte, right? An adept at least. And because of that knowledge, because of what I know to be true through experience of prayer, fasting, and meditation, this is not true. You do not have to have a mystical enlightenment to achieve eternality. That is going to happen regardless. Now, what happens when you get there, I believe, is that you get to look back through all of the lessons that you were supposed to learn. Some of them you do, and some of them you don't. And you get the option to return to learn those lessons a second time, or a third time, or a 4,000th time, depending on your soul. It is eternal. Now, possibly, if you are enlightened in the manner that they are talking about, then you don't have to come back to learn a new lesson. That is the extent of that, though, right? This is not a punishment. There are people who enjoy their life even though it is miserable to other people, right? Many of the homeless are quite happy to be homeless. I know that is hard to conceive of if you are happy in a home. But many people like living outside. They like roughing it. They are making the most out of their life. You are meant to make the most out of your life, to seek the things which bring you fulfillment and growth and all of the good things. You can choose that or you cannot choose that. Regardless, you are here to learn things, and when you get home, which is not here, right? When you go back to the source, you find out whether you passed or failed those tests. And you get the option to come back and retest the ones you failed. But none of that requires you to be mystically enlightened in order to achieve immortality. And that is the important part. Just in the exact same way that you do not have to accept the death of someone else for the forgiveness of your sins, you do not have to be spiritually enlightened to achieve the immortality. It is entirely possible to learn all of your lessons without ever achieving the mystical side of things. And therefore, you wouldn't be required to return in the exact same manner. But this, right, requiring that is prideful. That is, I have achieved something that you have not, and that makes me better than you. I don't believe that about the things that I do. That's why I relay them to you, right? I fully believe that you can achieve everything that I have, that there is nothing special about me other than the fact that I actually do the things. I actually pray, I actually fast, and I actually meditate. That is the difference from me and most people. And I do it without the preconceived notions of most people, and I do it without the ability to fool myself into believing I saw something I did not. I haven't mentioned that today, but I have aphantasia. I cannot close my eyes and willfully imagine anything. I cannot create whole cloth anything imaginary and see it in my mind. So if I see something in my mind, it is not me doing it. Back to the text. Is one, therefore, not describing dangers when speaking of the mysteries? Is it not robbing a man of happiness and of the best part of his life to take him to the portals of the netherworld? Terrible is the responsibility incurred by such an act. We talk about levels of responsibility all of the time. And yet, ought we to refuse that responsibility? These were the questions which the initiate had to put to himself. He was of opinion that his knowledge bore the same relation to the soul of the people as light does to darkness. But innocent happiness dwells in that darkness, and the mystics were of an opinion that happiness could not be sacrilegiously interfered with. For what would have happened in the first place if the mystic had betrayed his secret? He would have uttered words, and only words. The feelings and emotions which would have evoked the spirit from the words would have been absent. This is a big one for me, right? If you don't know, we have been struggling here to find direction on the channel other than what I'm doing right here. I considered for a while being argumentative to go to communist and socialist and other people and argue against them. I don't like that, right? I will do that in a face-to-face situation, but I really don't enjoy just picking apart somebody's argument when they cannot argue back. It really feels kind of pedantic to me. I got asked just last night, it's so funny how everything works out all of the time, right? Just last night on one of my reaction videos, somebody asked me, why do I react to people of faith? Well, that's a complicated answer. When I began this channel, I was in a different place. I believed in Christianity. When I began the Bible study, I believed in Christianity. It was the Bible study that led me away from Christianity, and that was 2 years into the channel. I was already reacting to these people. But towards the end of that, I was feeling bad about it, right? I don't like attacking people for their faith, and it is because of this, right? Why should I take away from you what is already working for you? If you are here, if you are this far into this, you are seeking. But those people aren't. I could go to Wes Huff, right? Wes Huff, he's really technically on top of this source came from this place at this time. But the problem is that the entire message of the entire book is corrupted. It is not intrinsically good at all. And that is a major problem. But if you are happy, if you have found your salvation, if you have found your path in any of the religions, it's not up to me to go to you and be like, Christianity is wrong, right? I do that, but I do that here. I do that when we're in these studies with people who are seeking more knowledge. I'm not going attacking Christians. That is not what I want to do, and that is why I stopped doing reactions to Christian music. That's why I don't do the discussions like I did with the communist, right? Even with that, knowing that is a much less objectionable thing, it's still not something that I want to do. And so I am still seeking direction here because of this, right? I could make a name for myself if I went out and started attacking these Christians. I don't want to do that. I don't want to build my name upon attacking somebody else's spirituality. I want to be known, if I am known, for standing up for my God and the things that I believe and the way that I believe them. I don't have to attack you in order to get my point across, The things that I believe are intrinsic to me, and they are self-evident through prayer, fasting, and meditation. All of that to say, right, this to me resonates. I do have a different knowledge. I want to give it to everybody, but not everybody is open to it. Not everybody is okay with their perceptions being changed due to new knowledge, and that sucks, right? Knowledge, you should always be teachable. I am still teachable with the things that I think I know, right? The things that I stand on, I am still willing to be corrected if things come along that correct me. That is the attitude that you need to have regardless of what you believe, right? Regardless of it, like right now, as we are speaking, there have been new discoveries in gravity. It is changing the way that we look at it. But there are people who will die on the old vision, even if it is proven that the new vision is better, in the exact same way that they killed Copernicus, right? Just because something is true does not mean that it will be accepted. That's the hard part of what I do, right? What I believe, what I have discussed and talked about so often here, I really do believe can change lives because it has changed mine in measurable, health-related ways, right? I have healed myself in a couple of different ways. I wish that everybody would listen, that everybody would experiment, because don't just take my word for it, put it into practice. See if it actually works. It worked for me. I assume that it will work for you. But don't just dismiss something because you don't believe in it. I just did a video yesterday on astrology. I don't believe in astrology. I was interested in investigating it to see if there was anything there, and not so much. But that's okay. Some of the ideas are still good, right? Having the idea of this planet signifies this thing in a religious sense was a good thing. That is something that we need to expound upon, not necessarily do away with, even if some of the things are not exactly correct, right? And if you're interested, that video will explain it a lot better. All right, back to the text. To do this, preparation, exercises, tests, and a complete change in the life of sense were necessary. Without this, the hearer would have been hurled into emptiness and nothingness. He would have been deprived of what constituted his happiness without receiving anything in exchange. One may also say that one could take nothing away from him, for mere words would change nothing in his life of feeling. He would only have been able to feel and experience reality through his senses. Nothing but a terrible misgiving, fatal to life, would be given him. This could only be construed as a crime. The wisdom of the mysteries is like a hothouse plant, which must be cultivated and fostered in seclusion. Anyone bringing it into the atmosphere of everyday ideas brings it into air which it cannot flourish. It withers away to nothing before the caustic verdict of modern science and logic. Let us, therefore, divest ourselves for a time of the education we gain through the microscope and telescope and the habit of thought derived from natural science, and let us cleanse our clumsy hands, which have been too busy with dissecting and experimenting, in order that we may enter the pure temple of the mysteries. For this is a candid and unbiased attitude of mind is necessary. The important point for the mystic is, at first, the frame of mind in which he approaches that to which him is the highest, the answers to the riddles of existence. Just in our day, when only gross physical science is recognized as containing truth, it is difficult to believe that in the highest things we depend upon the keynote of the soul. Knowledge, thereby, becomes an intimate, personal concern. But this is what it really is to give the mystic. But this is what it really is to the mystic. Tell someone the solution of the riddle of the universe. Give it to him ready-made. The mystic will find it to be nothing but an empty sound if the personality does not meet the solution halfway in the right manner. The solution in itself is nothing. It vanishes if the necessary feeling is not kindled at its contact. A divinity approaches you. It is either everything or nothing. Nothing if you meet it in the frame of mind with which you confront everyday matters. Everything if you are prepared and attuned to the meeting. What the divinity is in itself is a matter which does not affect you. The important point for you is whether it leaves you as it found you or makes another man of you. But this depends entirely on yourself. You must have been prepared by a special education, by a development of the inmost forces of your personality for the work of kindling and releasing what a divinity is able to kindle and release in you. What is brought to you depends on the reception you give it. Plutarch has told us about this education, and of the greeting which the mystic offers the divinity approaching him. For the gods, as it were, greets each one who approaches him with the words, "Know thyself," which is surely no worse than the ordinary greeting, "Welcome." Then we answer the divinity in the words, "Thou art," and thus we affirm that the true, primordial, and only adequate greeting for him is to declare that he is. In that existence really have no part here, for every mortal being. Is this still the quote? I think the quote ended. In that existence we really have no part here. For every mortal being, situated between birth and destruction, merely manifests an appearance, a feeble and uncertain image of itself. If we try to grasp it with our understanding, it is when water is tightly compressed and runs over merely through the pressure, spoiling what it touches. For the understanding, pursuing a too definite conception of each being that is subject to accidents and change, loses its way, now in the origin of being, now in its destruction, and is unable to apprehend anything lasting or really existing. For, as Heraclitus says, we cannot swim twice in the same wave, neither can we lay hold of the mortal being twice in the same state, for, through the violence and rapidity of movement it is destroyed and recomposed. It comes into being and again decays, it comes and goes. Therefore, that which is becoming can neither attain real existence, because growth neither ceases nor pauses. Change begins in the germ and forms an embryo. Then there appears a child, then a youth, a man, and an old man. The first beginnings and successive ages are continually annulled by the ensuing ones. Hence, it is ridiculous to fear one death, when we have already died in so many ways and are still dying. For, as Heraclitus says, not only is the death of fire the birth of air, and the death of air the birth of water, but the same change may be still more plainly seen in man. The strong man dies when he becomes old, the youth when he becomes a man, the boy on becoming a youth, and the child on becoming a boy. What existed yesterday dies today, and what is here today will die tomorrow. Nothing endures or is a unity, but we become many things, whilst matter wanders round one image in one common form. For, if we were always the same, how could we take pleasure in things which formerly did not please us? How could we love and hate, admire and blame opposite things? How could we speak differently and give ourselves up to different passions, unless we were endowed with a different shape, form, and different senses? For no one can rightly come into a different state without change, and one who is changed is no longer the same. But if he is not the same, he is no longer exist and is changed from what he was, becoming something else. Sense perception only led us astray because we do not know real being and mistook it for that which is only an appearance. Maybe that was the entire quote and I just messed up. But Plutarch often describes himself as an initiate. What he portrays here is a condition of the life of the mystic. Man acquires a kind of wisdom by means of which his spirit sees through the elusive character of sense life. What the senses regard as being, or reality, is plunged into the stream of becoming, and man is subject to the same conditions in this respect as all other things in the world. Before the eyes of his spirit he himself dissolves. The sum total of his being is broken up into parts, into fleeting phenomena. Birth and death lose their distinctive meaning and become moments of appearing and disappearing, just as much as any other happenings in the world. The highest cannot be found in the connection between development and decay. It can only be sought in what is really abiding, in what looks back to the past and forward to the future. To find that which looks an example, the spirit, backwards and forwards is the first stage of knowledge. This is the spirit, which is manifesting in and through the physical. It has nothing to do with physical growth. It does not come into being and again decay as do sense phenomena. One who lives entirely in the world of sense contains the spirit latent within him. One who has pierced through the illusion of the world of sense has the spirit within him as a manifest reality. That is true. Sorry. The man who attains to this insight has developed a new principle within him. Something has happened within him as in a plant when it adds a colored flower to its green leaves. It is true. The forces causing the flower to grow were already latent in the plant before the blossom appeared, but they only became effective when this took place. Divine, spiritual forces are latent in the man who lives merely through his senses, but they only become a manifest reality in the initiate. Such is the transformation which takes place in the mystic. By his development, he has added a new element to the world. The world of sense made him a human being endowed with senses, and then left him to himself. Nature has thus fulfilled her mission. What she is able to do with the powers operative in a man is exhausted. Not so the forces themselves. They lie as though spellbound in the merely natural man and await their release. They cannot release themselves. They fade away to nothing unless a man seizes upon them and develops them, unless he calls into actual being what is latent within him. Nature evolves from the imperfect to the perfect. She leads beings through a long series of stages from inanimate matter through all living forms up to physical man. Man looks around and finds himself a changing being with physical reality, but he also perceives within him the forces from which the physical reality arose. These forces are not what change, for they have given birth to the changing world. They are within man as a sign that there is more life within him than he can physically perceive. What they may make man is not yet there. He feels something flash up within him which created everything, including himself, and he feels that this will inspire him to a higher creative activity. This something is within him. It existed before his manifestation in the flesh and will exist afterwards. By means of it he became, but he may lay hold of it and take part in its creative activity. Such are the feelings animating the mystic after initiation. He feels the eternal and divine. His activity is to become a part of that divine creative activity. He may say to himself, I have discovered a higher ego within me, but that ego extends beyond the bounds of my sense existence. It existed before my birth and will exist after my death. This ego has created from all eternity. It will go on creating in all eternity. My physical personality is a creation of this ego. That I do not necessarily believe, but it has incorporated me within it. It works within me. I am a part of it. Now, I believe that your physical incarnation is created by God, not necessarily the ego. The ego is the soul, so kind of. The soul is the individualized piece of you that came from divinity, right? Divinity sectioned off a small portion of itself to become you. You are not a God, but you are a part of God. In the exact same way that this computer is a part of God and this microphone is too. So you are part of God, but you are not the incorporation of God, if that makes any sense, right? The soul is eternal. The soul and the ego can be interchangeable, but you didn't decide the physical incarnation. God did, and then assigned to the incarnation your soul. It's a little bit pedantic, but it makes a difference to me. What I henceforth create will be higher than the physical. My personality is only a means for this creative power, for this divine is within me. Thus did the mystic experience his birth into the divine. The mystic called the power that flashed up within him a demon. He was himself a product of this demon. It seemed to him as though another being had entered him and taken possession of his organs, a being standing between his physical personality and the all-ruling cosmic power, the divinity. This is one of those touchy subjects, right? There are entities. I fully believe that there is a whole spiritual evolution, the theory of spiritual evolution. I'm not going to get into all of it, but we are in the fifth dimension. In the sixth and seventh are these entities. Now, some of those are what we call angels and demons. Those reside on the seventh existence. And some of those are the ones called forces, the salamanders and Ifrit and thing of that nature. That is on the sixth plane of existence. You can communicate with these things. I don't, right? I've had an angel come to me. I've never sought out an angel. I have, well, let me rephrase that, because here recently I have been seeking, I have not found, right? I have been opening myself up to these entities, and I have not had any interaction with any of them. And so, right, this demon can be good. Some of the entities are aligned for the betterment of humankind. Some of them are absolutely not. And if you open yourself up, you have to be exceedingly careful, right? I disabuse people from doing this idly. You have to be exceedingly careful, because while the good entities are there to help you, the bad ones are not, and they can lie to you. And they are very good at it. They can convince you that they are telling the truth. They can imitate the good entities. So you need to be exceedingly careful whenever you are attempting to communicate with them. Never let them take possession of your organs. Never invite them inside of you. That is an exceedingly bad idea. You can be possessed. Back to the text. I do not seek a demon, right? You can say that intuition is the demon. That's fine. I seek my intuition. I believe that the intuition is how spirit communicates with us. Your ability to intuit is really what sets us apart from the animals. Right? Communication and all, there are other things, but in the base of it, it is the understanding. You do not need an outside entity in order to achieve enlightenment. And if anybody is telling you that you do, then you have a severe problem, right? Someone is misguiding you. You do not have to have a demon for this to work. I don't. I do things. Back to the text. He said to himself, I have become a human being in mighty nature, but nature did not complete her task. This completion I must take in hand myself, but I cannot accomplish it in the gross kingdom of nature to which my physical personality belongs. What is possible to develop in that realm has already been developed. Therefore, I must leave this kingdom and take up the building in the realm of the spirit, at the point where nature left off. I must create an atmosphere of life, not to be found in the outer nature. This atmosphere of life was prepared for the mystic in the mystery temples. There, the forces slumbering within him were awakened. There, he was changed into a higher creative spirit nature. This transformation was a delicate process. It could not bear the untempered atmosphere of everyday life. But when once it was completed, its result was that the initiate stood as a rock, rising from the eternal and able to defy all storms. But it was impossible for him to reveal his experiences to anyone unprepared to receive them. Plutarch says that the mysteries gave deep understanding of the true nature of the demons. And Cicero tells us that from the mysteries, when they are explained and traced back to their meaning, we learn the nature of things rather than that of the gods. From such statements, we see clearly that there were higher revelations for the mystics about the nature of things than that which popular religion was able to impart. Indeed, we see that the demons, in example, spiritual beings, and the gods themselves need explaining. There are no incarnated gods. You will not see God. Therefore, you may see entities, but you will not see God. Therefore, initiates went back to beings of higher nature than demons or gods, and this was characteristic of the essence of the wisdom of the mysteries. The people represented the gods and demons in images borrowed from the world of sense reality. Would not one who had penetrated into the nature of the eternal doubt about the eternal nature of such gods as these? How could the Zeus of popular imagination be eternal if he bore within him the qualities of a perishable being? One thing was clear to the mystics, that man arrives at a conception of the gods in a different way from the conception of other things. An object belonging to the outer world compels us to form a very definite idea of it. In contrast to this, we form our conception of the gods in a freer and somewhat arbitrary manner. The control of the outer world is absent. Reflection teaches us that what we conceive as gods is not subject to outer control. This places us in logical uncertainty. We begin to feel that we ourselves are the creators of our gods. Indeed, we ask ourselves, how have we arrived at a conception of the universe that goes beyond physical reality? The initiate was obliged to ask himself such questions. His doubts were justified. Look at all representations of the gods, he might think to himself. Are they not like the beings we meet in the world of sense? Did not man create them for himself by giving or withholding from them, in his thought, some quality belonging to beings of the sense world? The savage lover of the chase creates a heaven in which the gods themselves take part in glorious hunting, and the Greek peopled his Olympus with divine beings whose models were taken from his own surroundings. The philosopher Xenophanes drew attention to this fact with a crude logic. We know that the older Greek philosophers were entirely dependent on the wisdom of the mysteries. We will afterwards prove this in detail, beginning with Heraclitus. What Xenophanes says may at once be taken as the conviction of a mystic. It runs thus. Men who picture the gods as created in their own human forms give them human senses, voices, and bodies. But if cattle and lions had hands and knew how to use them, like men, in painting and working, they would paint the forms of the gods and shape their bodies as their own bodies were constituted. Horses would create gods in horse form, and cattle would make gods like bulls. That is true. Through insight of this kind, man may begin to doubt the existence of anything divine. He may reject all mythology and only recognize as reality what is forced upon him by his sense perception. But the mystic did not become a doubter of this kind. He saw that the doubter would be like a plant, were it to say, "My crimson flowers are null and futile, because I am complete with my green leaves. What I may add to them is only adding elusive appearance." Just as little could the mystic rest content with gods thus created, the gods of the people. If the plant could think, it would understand that the forces which created its green leaves are also destined to create crimson flowers, and it would not rest till it investigated those forces and come face to face with them. This was the attitude of the mystic towards the gods of the people. He did not deny them or say they were illusion, but he knew that they had been created by man. The same forces, the same divine element which are at work in nature, are at work in the mystic. They create within him images of the gods. He wishes to see the force that creates the gods. It comes from a higher source than these gods. Xenophanes alludes to it thus. There is one God greater than all gods and men. His form is not like that of mortals. His thoughts are not their thoughts. And that is how we began this. This God was also the God of the mysteries. He might have been called a hidden God, for man can never find him with his senses only. Look at the outer things around you, you will find nothing divine. Exert your reason, you may be able to detect the laws by which things appear and disappear, but even your reason will not show you anything divine. Saturate your imagination with religious feeling, and you may be able to create images which you may take to be gods, but your reason will pull them to pieces. For it will prove to you that you created them yourself and borrowed the material from the sense world. So long as you look at outer things in your quality of simply a reasonable being, you must deny the existence of God, for God is hidden from the senses and from that reason of yours which explains sense perceptions. This explains why I explained about my aphantasia. God lies hidden, spellbound in the world, and you need his own power to find him. You must awaken that power in yourself. These are the teachings which were given to the candidate for initiation. And now, there began for him the great cosmic drama in which his life was bound up. The action of the drama meant nothing less than the deliverance of the spellbound God. Where is God? This was the question asked by the soul of the mystic. God is not existent, but nature exists, and in nature he must be found. There, he is found in an enchanted grave. It was in a higher sense that the mystics understood the words, God is love, for God has exalted that love to its climax. He has sacrificed himself in infinite love. He has poured himself out, fallen into number in the manifold of nature. Things in nature live, and he does not live. He slumbers within them. We are able to awaken him if we are to give him existence. We must deliver him by the creative power within us. The candidate now looks into himself. As latent, creative power as yet without existence, the divine is living in his soul, and the soul is a sacred place where the spellbound God may wake up to liberty. The soul is the mother who is able to conceive the God by nature. If the soul allows herself to be impregnated by nature, she will give birth to the divine. God is born from the marriage of the soul with nature, no longer a hidden, but a manifest God. He has life, a perceptible life, wandering amongst men. He is the God freed from enchantment, the offspring of the God who is hidden by a spell. He is not the great God who was and is to come, but yet he may be taken, in a certain sense, as the revelation of him. The Father remains at rest in the unseen. The Son is born to man out of his own soul. Mystical knowledge is thus an actual event in the cosmic process. It is the birth of the divine. It is an event as real as any natural event, only enacted upon a higher plane. The great secret of the mystic is that he himself creates his God, but that he first prepares himself to recognize the God created by him. The uninitiated man has no feeling for the Father of that God, for that Father slumbers under a spell. The Son appears to be born of a virgin, the soul having seemingly given birth to him without impregnation. All her other children are conceived by the sense world. Their father may be seen and touched, having the life of sense. The divine Son alone is begotten of the hidden, eternal, divine Father himself. And that is going to bring us to the end of the introduction in the first 2 chapters of... what is this called again? I've forgotten. It's Rudolf Steiner's Christianity as a Mystical Fact. First 2 chapters of Christianity as a Mystical Fact. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. I understand. I have some unconventional beliefs and a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. The clarification of my beliefs as opposed to the beliefs outlined here is the entire reason why we are doing this. I do believe that I have a higher knowledge. I know that sounds awfully prideful, but I really do strive to keep it on the humble level. I have had something revealed to me that I could not make up on my own. I cannot willfully imagine any of these things that other people can. Most of the world can close their eyes and imagine something, right? If I tell you, close your eyes and imagine a blade of grass, you can see it. I can't. If you say a box, you can see it. I can't. Now, recently, I've been able to heal that in a small measure. I can see colors. For the first time in my life, I am about to turn 48 years old, and for the first time in my life, I've been able to see colors intentionally when I close my eyes for the first time in the last 6 months. And so, I cannot fool myself into creating something and thinking that the thing I created was from another source. The things that I have seen came from another source because I was awake and I was unable to do it for myself. I have effected change in my life by using the knowledge that I have been given, right? I perform magic. I manipulate the electromagnetic forces of creation, which is the Holy Spirit. I have been able to move the energy through my body in ways that I have detailed in extensive detail. And I've been able to heal my throat. I've been able to heal my shoulder. I am in the process of healing my back and my leg. These are things that I have done. I cannot prove that to you, but it is a truth. You don't have to believe me. Put it to the test yourself. Watch the videos. Buy the book. Do the work. You can get there. I fully believe that. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment. If you agree or disagree with anything that was said, put it in the box down below. And if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me read or discuss in the manner that we are doing here, drop that in the box as well. And if you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of my book. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.